The room around you looks harmless. A wall in front of you, a ceiling above you, a doorway, a screen, a table, a few objects your brain stopped noticing years ago. Nothing in this scene feels dangerous, demanding, or even important. And yet your nervous system has been reading this room all day as a very specific kind of world. A world with no real distance. From the moment you woke up, the farthest thing your eyes have landed on may have been a bathroom mirror, a kitchen cabinet, the dashboard through a windshield, the laptop across a desk, the television across the room, the bedroom wall before sleep. Meter after meter, enclosure after enclosure, your brain has been asked to operate inside spaces so visually short that one of its oldest orienting signals barely arrives anymore. You do not feel this happening because the effect is subtle. There is no pain receptor for visual confinement. No alarm goes off when your world becomes too shallow. But the brain does not treat near space and far space as the same thing. A room is not just a backdrop. It is a set of limits. And when those limits surround you, hour after hour, day after day, year after year, your eyes, your attention, your posture, your breathing, and even the tone of your thoughts begin adapting to a world that never really opens. That adaptation feels normal only because it happens slowly. But by the end of this video, the wall in front of you will not look like background anymore. For most of human history, the visual world did not end at 3 meters. It unfolded. Grass opened into distance. Trees broke into gaps. Hills gave way to sky. Water reflected light far beyond reach. Even when early humans were focused on what was near, hands, tools, fire, food, another face, the eyes were living inside a landscape that kept offering depth. The horizon was not decoration. It was part of the brain's operating environment. That matters because vision was never designed only to identify objects. It was designed to locate the body within space. How far is shelter? How open is the terrain? Is something moving at the edge of the field? Where is the next safe path? A brain shaped in open environments learned to alternate constantly between near detail and far orientation, between the object in the hand and the world beyond it. Modern indoor life breaks that rhythm. The walls of a room create a visual world with an artificial stopping point. The eye no longer travels outward until distance dissolves into sky or terrain. It travels until it hits paint, drywall, glass, fabric, brick. Again and again, the nervous system meets the same message. This is the edge. Nothing beyond this matters right now. And when that message repeats across a lifetime, home, office, elevator, hallway, car, store, gym, apartment, hotel, waiting room, the brain begins organizing itself around short-range living. Not just practical living, visual living. A world dominated by reach, task, obstacle, and control. This is why the issue is larger than screen time. A screen is only one expression of a deeper problem. The real change is that the human visual system evolved in environments with layered distance and now spends most of its waking hours inside environments where distance has been architecturally removed. The brain adapted to vastness first. Confinement came later, and far too recently to erase that inheritance in full. Your eyes are not passive windows. They are active measuring devices, constantly reshaping their focus to match the distance of what you are looking at. When something is far away, the ciliary muscle relaxes, the lens flattens, and the visual system enters its lowest effort state. When something is close, that muscle contracts, the lens rounds, and the entire optical system shifts into near-focus mode. That shift was never meant to last all day. For most of your life, it now does. The screen, the countertop, the book, the hallway, the opposite wall, the steering wheel, the face across the table. Each one keeps the eyes working inside the same shallow band of demand. Not exactly one distance, but one kind of distance, close enough that the visual system never fully releases. You rarely feel the contraction directly. You feel what it leaves behind, the slight heaviness behind the eyes late in the day. The impulse to blink harder, rub your face, stand up, pace, or look away for no clear reason. The vague mental tiredness that seems too large for how little you physically did. None of this feels dramatic because the strain is low and continuous. But that is exactly how long-term conditions are often built. Not by force, but by repetition. And the eyes do not do this work alone. Near focus pulls other systems with it. The eyes converge inward. Blinking often becomes thinner. The head grows still. The neck begins quietly supporting a gaze that no longer wants to let go. A visual task becomes a posture. Then the posture becomes familiar enough that you stop noticing you are carrying it. That is the hidden problem with a world that keeps ending a few feet away. The eyes were built to alternate between effort and release, precision and distance, object and horizon. Instead, they are being held in a low-grade state of readiness from morning until sleep. The effort per minute is small. The accumulation is not. And that accumulation is where the brain begins to change with them. Your brain does not treat all visible space as equal. The space close to your body and the space beyond it are handled as two different worlds because they demand two different kinds of survival. Near space is the zone of action. It is where your hands can reach, where your body can bump into something, where your foot can catch an edge, where your face can meet another face, where the next task waits to be done. It is the space of correction, adjustment, precision. The brain watches it closely because near space is where mistakes become immediate. Far space serves a different purpose. It is not mainly about doing. It is about orienting. It tells the brain what kind of world the body is inside, open or closed, stable or changing, safe to widen into, or demanding that attention stay tight. Far space gives the nervous system scale. It tells you whether you are moving through a hallway, a forest, a street, a field, a coastline, a world that continues beyond the next few steps. That difference changes the kind of mind you inhabit. When vision is dominated by near space, the brain shifts toward management. It becomes more selective, more vigilant, more concerned with what must be handled now. It becomes excellent at handling and worse at opening. That mode is useful. You need it to cook, read, type, drive, clean, button the shirt, answer a message. It is the mode of desks, dashboards, kitchen counters, checkout lines, and glowing rectangles held inches from the face. But it was never meant to be the only visual mode you live in from morning until sleep. Far viewing does something that close viewing cannot. It reminds the brain that life is larger than the next object. Attention stops gripping so tightly. The nervous system loosens its hold on the immediate. Thought expands because the field expands. This is why a room can make the mind feel compressed without your realizing why. The visual world kept telling your brain the same thing for hours. Stay close, stay narrow, stay ready. And eventually, the mind obeyed. You feel this before you can explain it. By late afternoon, the mind can begin to feel strangely overfilled. Not because anything dramatic happened, not because the day was emotionally heavy, just because everything has started arriving too close. A message feels more intrusive than it should. A small request feels larger than it is. A minor problem seems to take up the whole field of thought, as if the brain has lost the ability to keep things in proportion. That is not just mood, it is scale. When vision spends hours inside short range, attention starts adopting the same geometry. It becomes excellent at the immediate and less comfortable with the spacious. It sharpens around what is nearest, what is changing, what requires response now that is useful for modern life. It helps you read, sort, compare, answer, fix, and decide. But it also means the mind is being trained to live at the distance of the next task. And a mind trained that way tires differently. It does not always feel exhausted. It feels crowded. Thoughts stack too tightly. The next demand arrives before the last one has had room to settle. You are still functioning, still answering, still moving through the day, but the inner sense of width begins to disappear. What is lost is not intelligence, it is perspective. That is why indoor fatigue can feel so disproportionate. You may not have done anything physically difficult. You may have spent the day in safety, comfort, and routine. Yet by evening, the brain feels used, not because it faced danger, but because it spent hour after hour filtering, selecting, and managing what was close. Attention was never allowed to widen long enough to recover its sense of scale. And once that happens, life itself can start to feel more urgent than it really is. Not because the problems grew, but because the frame around them shrank. This is why a brief look into distance can change your state so quickly. The world becomes larger first, then the mind remembers how to be. Distance is not empty to the brain. It is a signal. When you look far enough away, something important stops being asked of you. The eyes no longer have to keep measuring, correcting, and preparing for what is immediately in front of the body. The visual system shifts out of handling mode. It stops organizing itself around the next object, the next edge, the next task, the next thing that must be managed within reach. And the nervous system feels that change almost at once. This is why looking into distance often feels relieving before it feels beautiful. The effect begins before meaning arrives. Before you admire the sky, before you think about the view, before you tell yourself to calm down, the visual demand has already changed. The eyes soften. The tiny near-range corrections begin to quiet. Attention no longer has to grip the world so tightly. For a moment, the brain is allowed to orient instead of control. That distinction matters more than most people realize. Orientation is one of the nervous system's oldest stabilizing functions. A brain that can see farther can spread attention across a larger field, detect movement earlier, and map the environment with less urgency. It no longer has to behave as if everything important is about to happen within arm's length. Distance restores proportion. It gives the body a wider frame in which to place itself. It tells your system there is space beyond what is immediate, and that alone changes how tightly the body holds itself. Which is why so many people misread what they are missing. They think they need less stress, less work, fewer screens, a better mood. Sometimes they do. But beneath all of that, the nervous system may be asking for something more primitive than rest. It may be asking for rain, a tree line, a roof line against the sky, water extending past the shore, a road that keeps going, any far point that tells the brain the world does not end where the room ends. That is not scenery. It is regulation. The brain does not just see the room. It prepares the body for the kind of room it sees. When the visual world stays close, the body begins organizing itself around closeness. The head moves slightly forward. The eyes fix harder. The neck stiffens just enough to feel ordinary. The upper back rounds a little more. The shoulders narrow. None of this looks dramatic in the mirror. That is why it goes unnoticed. But the posture is not random. It is the physical shape of a nervous system living in near space. Close vision asks the body to prepare for what is within reach. Read this, touch that, avoid that edge, adjust to that object. The muscles around the eyes, jaw, throat, neck, and upper chest begin acting like support staff for constant short-range engagement. Over time, the whole front of the body becomes slightly more involved in holding attention in place. You are not only looking at a nearby world, you are bracing for one. Breath changes with it. A body organized around forward visual demand rarely breathes with full ease. The lower ribs move less. The inhale climbs higher. The exhale gets shorter and quieter. Not because something is terribly wrong, but because the body is not behaving like it is in open terrain. It is behaving like it is leaning toward the next task. And a body leaning toward the next task does not breathe the same way as a body that feels space around it. This is why the shift can feel so immediate when you step outside and look far. The neck stops reaching. The jaw softens. The chest loosens. The breath drops lower without instruction. You do not consciously tell the ribs to move more. The visual system changes first, and the body follows. What begins as a visual condition becomes a postural pattern. The postural pattern becomes a breathing pattern, and the breathing pattern becomes a state of mind. After enough repetition, the room is no longer just something you are in. It becomes something your body starts carrying, even after you leave it. When you are young, the brain can hide a great deal from you. The eyes refocus quickly. Balance corrects itself before you notice the sway. The neck recovers from hours of visual stiffness. The body absorbs a shallow visual world and covers the cost with speed. You may still feel tired, distracted, or restless, but the system has enough reserve to keep the problem from becoming obvious. Age reduces that reserve. The older brain depends more heavily on clean orientation signals to stay steady, confident, and calm in space. Eye movements slow slightly. Depth changes are processed a little less fluidly. Balance relies more on cooperation between vision, the inner ear, and the body's sense of position. That means an older nervous system does not need less environmental information. It needs better information, more depth, more variation, more chances to map where the body is in relation to the world around it. But this is often the stage of life when the visual world becomes smallest. More time indoors, more time seated, more time in familiar rooms, familiar routes, familiar distances. The environment becomes safer in one sense and poorer in another. The eyes practice short-range focus more than depth shifts. The head turns less. The body scans less. The brain receives fewer opportunities to rehearse the very skills that keep a person stable in open space. That is why some older adults feel surprisingly uneasy outdoors. Not because the outside world suddenly became hostile, but because the orienting systems have been underused. The room protected them from challenge, but it also protected them from practice, and what is not practiced begins to feel threatening. Then a quiet loop begins. The world feels bigger. The body feels less certain inside it. Movement becomes more cautious. Caution reduces exploration. Reduced exploration shrinks the visual world further. And the smaller the visual world becomes, the less information the brain receives to rebuild confidence. An aging brain does not need to be kept inside a smaller frame. It needs regular contact with a larger one so it can keep remembering where the body is, how space works, and that the world beyond the wall is still navigable. The problem is not that you spend time in one small room. The problem is that your brain keeps leaving one shallow visual field only to enter another. Bedroom wall, bathroom mirror, kitchen counter, phone screen, windshield, office monitor, grocery aisle, elevator door, television, ceiling before sleep, different places, same instruction. Keep attention close. Modern life no longer traps the body in one enclosure. It hands the nervous system a sequence of enclosures so continuous that they begin to feel like open space, But the brain does not care that the wallpaper changed. It cares that the far point disappeared again. This is why so many people feel mentally tired without understanding what exactly exhausted them. The day was filled with transitions, but not with expansion. You moved from task to task, building to building, app to app, room to room, yet your visual world rarely opened far enough for the orienting system to take over. You were active, but almost never released. The car is a perfect example. It feels mobile, but visually it is another near-space machine. Mirrors, dashboard, brake lights, signs, lane markings, all immediate, all relevant, all demanding micro-corrections. Then you arrive somewhere and step into another controlled box where the eyes resume the same job. Even leisure repeats the pattern. Sofa, tablet, lamplight, wall. What wears the brain down is not one screen or one room. It is the repetition of a world that keeps stopping a few feet away. When that happens often enough, the nervous system stops expecting distance at all. Open space begins to feel unusual instead of normal. And the moment open space becomes unusual, relief becomes accidental. You only get it when you happen to step outside at the right moment, catch a long view through a window, or pause on a road where the land finally continues. The tragedy is not confinement itself. It is how completely modern life disguises confinement as variety, while feeding the brain the same shallow geometry from waking to sleep every single day. Then the pattern breaks. You step outside, or you reach a window with actual depth beyond it. The roof line gives way to sky. The street does not end at the next wall. The trees are no longer decoration behind glass, but markers in real space. And before you have decided whether the view is beautiful, useful, or calming, the nervous system has already begun changing its priorities. The room was asking for management. Distance asks for orientation. That difference is felt almost immediately. The eyes stop behaving like instruments for handling nearby objects and begin acting like sensors of the wider world. Attention is no longer pinned to the next task, the next correction, the next thing within reach. It spreads. The mind does not become empty. It becomes less crowded. Thoughts stop stacking so tightly on top of one another. The body no longer behaves as if everything important is happening inches from the face. What returns first is proportion. The same life is still waiting for you. The same messages, the same responsibilities, the same unfinished tasks, but they no longer fill the entire frame with the same force, because the frame itself has changed. Distance gives the brain context. It places what is near, inside, something larger than itself. That is why a long road, a stretch of water, a line of trees, or even the far end of a city street can feel medicinal without doing anything obvious. The effect is not fantasy. It is the nervous system recovering a sense of scale it has been missing all day. This is why some of the most restorative moments in life contain almost nothing to do. You are not solving a problem. You are not completing a task. You are simply standing inside a field of vision that does not end immediately. And for a brain that has spent hours managing walls, edges, objects, and demands, that is not trivial. It is relief in its original form, not escape from life, but reconnection to the larger space in which life is happening. You do not need to escape your life to change this. The brain is not asking for a perfect environment. It is asking for interruptions in the pattern. Right now, most people live inside a visual chain where one shallow field hands them to the next. Desk to phone, phone to hallway, hallway to car, car to store, store to sofa. The eyes keep stopping close, so the nervous system keeps behaving as if closeness is the whole world. The simplest way to change that is not to abandon modern life. It is to puncture that chain often enough that the brain stops believing the wall is the default condition of existence. That can begin with something as small as where you place your body. Sit where your gaze can travel outward instead of terminating on an interior surface. Let a window become more than decoration. Use distance the way you would use fresh air, not as a special event, but as something the system functions better with when it arrives regularly. If you take a phone call, let your eyes leave the room while you do. If you pause between tasks, give the nervous system a far point instead of another close one. If you eat, work, rest, or think in the same places every day, change the geometry of those places just enough that your vision no longer ends at the nearest object every time. Small changes matter here because the damage was built by small repetitions. The repair works the same way. The goal is not to spend your life chasing scenic beauty. It is to stop allowing every environment to make the same demand on your eyes. Once distance begins reappearing throughout the day, even in modest ways, the brain starts remembering something it had quietly stopped expecting, that the world continues beyond the next few feet, and that it is allowed to meet that world with less tension than before. The most useful way to do this is not as therapy after a bad day. It is as a rhythm before the day closes around you. Give the brain distance early, before screens, rooms, and tasks teach it to live at short range again. A few minutes of real outward viewing in the first part of the day can change the visual tone of everything that follows. Then return to it at the moments when modern life naturally collapses back into nearness. After long reading, after driving, after laptop work, after indoor chores, after meals, in the evening before sleep. Not because you need a complicated protocol, but because those are the moments when the nervous system most easily forgets that space exists beyond what is immediately in front of it. If you can step outside, do that. If you cannot, stand at the furthest window available and let your gaze travel as far as your environment allows. Do not stare hard. Do not turn it into another task. Let the eyes release. Let them move. Let distance do the work distance has always done. That is the reset. Not a technique to master. Not another habit to perform perfectly. Just a repeated return to scale. A way of reminding the brain several times a day that life is larger than the next surface, the next object, the next demand within reach. Do that often enough, and the world begins to feel open again before anything in your schedule is changed. The wall was never just a wall. It was a limit your brain kept reading so often that it stopped feeling like a limit at all. The room felt neutral because it was familiar. The shallow visual world felt harmless because it was normal. But normal is not the same as nourishing, and the brain has been living on less depth than it was built to expect. That loss does not arrive dramatically. It arrives as a mind that feels more crowded than it should, a body that tightens around what is close, a day that feels full before anything truly difficult has happened. Over time, the nervous system begins to resemble the geometry it lives inside. When the world keeps ending a few feet away, thought begins to do the same. That is why distance matters. Not as scenery, not as luxury, not as something reserved for vacations or lucky landscapes. Distance is a biological experience. It tells the eyes to release, attention to widen, the body to soften, orientation to return. It restores scale, and scale changes how life feels from the inside. The same responsibilities remain. The same tasks remain, but they no longer occupy the whole sky of the mind. You do not need a different life to begin giving that back. You need moments of genuine outwardness, a horizon if you have one, a long street if you do not, trees beyond a parking lot, sky above a roofline, water, distance, open ground, any far point wide enough for the eyes to travel and the mind to follow. Because that may be what your brain has been missing most of all. Not more stimulation, not more advice, not more effort, just a place to range again. And sometimes that is where calm begins.